Hello, everybody. My name is Jacqueline Kelly, and I am here and delighted to introduce you to the writer Karen Cushman. Karen has a degree in Greek and English and master's degrees in both human behavior and museum studies, and I think that's all really interesting, and I really want to quiz her about that, but that's not why we're here today. In her past 1996, Karen won a Newbery Medal for The Midwife's Apprentice, set in medieval times. And in 1995, she won a Newbery Honor for Catherine called Birdie, also set in medieval times. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Her latest book, published 4 days ago, is this. Hold it up and show it to you so you can all see it. This is called War and Millie McGonigle, just out 4 days ago, and it's available through independent bookstores everywhere. And we would also be so happy if you would buy your copy from the Nowhere bookstore, sponsored through the festival at their website, War and Millie McGonigle, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So briefly, it is September 1941. And 12-year-old Milly Mcgonagall is having a hard time of it. She is lucky enough to live near the beach in sunny San Diego, and that sounds absolutely perfect, with her parents and her younger brother and sister. But her beloved poker-playing grandmother has died only a couple months earlier, and a distant relative is moving into the family's already overcrowded home. Europe stands perched on the brink of war, and then the Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor, and everything changes overnight, not just Milly's world, but everybody's world. So let's talk about Milly. So Here's the first question, and I guess it's probably the most obvious question. Where did you get the idea for this particular book?
Well, for 52 years now, I've been listening to my husband's stories about growing up in Mission Beach, when it was like a small, Mission Bay, I guess. It was like a small fishing village rather than the world-class resort it is now. And he would row his boat out into the middle of the bay and fish for perch and small halibut and watch seals frolicking in the water and seagulls overhead croaking and creaking. When the tide went out, the beach turned into mud. It was mud flats, pocked with eelgrass and pickleweed, and alive with small crustaceans that lured seabirds coming in. So he had all these stories about that, and it sounded so idyllic, and he found such solace and peace there. I wanted to use that setting, and I needed to invent a character who could really use a little solace and comfort and peace. And that's how Milly was born. She's grappling with growing up, facing her fears, and having to negotiate the changes that come with a world at war. And she's part me, she's part Phil's memories, and she's part sort of every young person who has to face challenges with courage and humor and spunk, probably a great deal of spunk. So that's where it came from.
So Milly comes from your husband's memories. What was it like? Was it different or difficult in any way to convert a boy's memories into a girl's daily life?
Well, I did pay attention to that because he spent a lot of time playing baseball on the beach and doing things that Milly wasn't interested in doing. But being a girl myself, and I grew up in LA, so we were now and then at the beach. So I remembered what we did at the beach. But Milly doesn't do much at first. She's so worried about the future, and her grandmother had given her a little book. A booklet, a notebook, that's the word, and told her that she can use it to remember things that are dead or lost, write them down in her little book. and then she'd have them to remember. Milly, of course, misunderstands, and she turns the book into the Book of Dead Things, and she goes on the beach hunting for dead jellyfish and shrimp, and watches the paper for the names of soldiers who have been killed, and even Carol Lombard, the movie actress, and she writes all of those in her book. And how she realizes that's not what Grandma meant, and how that affects her, and how she allows herself to change and to see what's good in the world and figure out how to keep it, is most of the book, or where it's heading anyway.
So from your description there, it starts out, it sounds like a downer, but the book is not a downer at all, and it certainly does not end on a down note. How were you able to pull that off?
Well, I wanted there to be hope. I wanted to show options. I wanted to give young readers an example of someone who was able to find in the world what nurtured her and comforted her, and inspire them to find something that does that for them. I mean, I know that young people now are frightened and worried, not COVID and all the political upheaval and global violence. You know, it's frightening and scary, and I imagine that they could use a little comfort and solace, a little idyllic place where they could go, and it would help and support them. Work on that. Yeah.
So what would you like kids who read this book and adults who read it with their maybe grandchildren? I think it'd be a terrific read for kids and grandparents together. What would you like them to take away from the book when they have finished?
Well, I think what I just said, I would like them to be inspired to find things that give them solace and comfort in hard times. I would like them to see how there are options. There are always options, that there are different ways of feeling, that to get out of their own space, which they can't now. Now, see, here I am telling them what I would like them to do, and they can't at this point. But what helped Milly was to make contact with other people, to build relationships with her friend Rosie, and the sea captain, and other people, that she didn't have to just sit and brood by herself. It's hard for me to say what I would like them to take away, because I think it really depends on the reader, that they find what they need in a book. After I wrote The Midwife's Apprentice, a 5-year-old girl told me that it's a book all about a cat. So to her, it was about a cat. I heard from a high school group in LA, in a very low income neighborhood, and they thought it was a book about homelessness, and it spoke to them. Mm-hmm. And I heard from a young woman who had been hospitalized for a suicide attempt. And she wrote and told me, I have her actual words here. She said, "It's a model for finding ways to be myself when I feel hopeless and have no options." So I never would have set out to say, I'm going to write a book that will help, a suicidal young woman. But that's what she found in the book. And I think that's what's really rich, when people find other things that I can write. I want young readers to get this, and that's not the way it works. They do themselves. They find
it.
Right.
Right. They get things that you never anticipated.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Let me ask you this, since this is a book that started with your husband's childhood memories, what has he taken away from it, or what does he think about it?
Oh, he is so happy that I am celebrating the Bay where he grew up. He lived there from the time he was, maybe 4 years old till he went away to college. And he has said, the Bay didn't belong to me. He said, I belonged to the Bay. That's how important it was, that it was like a part of him. And he loved that I was able to celebrate that, and that he was able to spend a lot of time talking about his memories over these many, many years. And they helped me write a book, and they enriched me hearing what he was saying. Yeah, so he's very pleased.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, let me ask you this. So The Midwife Apprentice and Catherine Called Birdie both won huge prizes. They're both set in medieval times.
Right.
And now suddenly we are at the beginning of World War II. What, if any, difference is there in the way you had to research medieval times versus the start of World War II?
I think there are a lot more current research possibilities for a current day thing. I couldn't read a medieval newspaper. Though I could read broadsides when I did the Elizabethan books, but for medieval, I couldn't read newspapers. I could only read what other people said about that time. I mean, there were very few primary sources that I could understand and that I could read. With the modern book, there were not only a lot of books, but the Historical Society, San Diego Historical Society publications really helped me. And I found on eBay a guidebook for 1940 for the zoo, and a book about Know Your Warplanes for Milly when she became a plane spotter, so that I had actual contemporary resources that I could look at, things that Milly would have seen or would have known about, like front pages of newspapers and things. So I think it's the immediacy that was very different. And I wrote about it 1 year. The Middle Ages were hundreds and hundreds of years. So when I wrote Catherine Called Birdie, it really helped me because I was just starting out to pick one particular year. And then I could find out historically what was happening, who was king, who was coming and going. I found out about the expulsion of the Jews from England in 1290. So it helped me to pick a year like that and find what resources I could. I was able to go to San Diego and walk on the beach at Mission Bay, though it's completely different now. The bay was all dredged, and you can ride, they have not ocean liners, but huge yacht kinds of things, and all these recreational opportunities, which they didn't have. Phil said, as I said at the beginning, it was more like a small fishing village. So I was able to go there and walk and smell and listen to the birds and watch the waves come and go. When the tide's out, there are no mud flats anymore. It's not a tidal kind of marsh anymore because of the dredging. But I could imagine. I was able to go to La Jolla Cove, where Milly goes looking for abalone, and see the dangerous cliffs and how hard it would have been and how stupid it was for her to think that she could do it as a 12-year-old girl. So all of those things I had opportunity to do, which I didn't for the medieval books.
Right. So, and I'm thinking about the scene where she tries to go abalone diving. What's your favorite scene in the book? Do you have one?
My favorite scene, I think, is where she wakes up she's wakened really early in the morning by her little brother Pete, whom she loves, and he's so lovable. I'm not surprised that she loves him. And she takes him in and feeds him some cereal, and they watch the stars go out and the moon, the sky lights up, and she tells him things. She makes things up. I really love that scene, and I had a younger brother, so I think that a lot of his lovableness, my brother's lovableness, got translated into Pete. So I think that's probably my favorite scene.
I think that does come through. I think the relationship between Milly and Pete is really charming, really lovely. And I think the reader can tell that there's something personal behind that.
Yeah.
So let's see. My next question for you is about how and where you write. Tell us about your writing process. People are always interested in how a writer does what she does.
When we moved to the island, I live on an island near Seattle, and when we moved there, one of the things that I really liked about the house that we bought was this small outbuilding that had been used by another owner as a dance studio and somebody else as her son's bedroom, but we turned it into a writing room for me. And my computer was there and comfortable chairs and 1,000 books all around. And I hated going there.
Really?
I stopped. I felt isolated. I felt apart, like I was in quarantine or something. It was very strange, but that's how I felt. So I went back into the house, and there was a loft that I turned into a writing loft. And it has a big chair and books and things, and I never write there. Where I write is in this big green Barca-Lounger recliner in the middle of the living room. We have big windows that look out to the outside, and there's deer walking by, and I can hear owls and a lot of little bird chatter. And I like that, and I think that it helps me when I'm stuck to get out of my head and to look outside, and to take a few deep breaths, sometimes put down the computer and go and walk a little, and then come back and start again. So my process is very interesting. I was once asked to write a piece for a blog called Writer's Routines. And my husband thought that was the funniest thing he ever heard, because I have no routine. It's all free form. I will try to sit down every morning and do something with what I have. Like, my favorite is revision, to sit down and to do that revision. Makes something much richer and more real. My least favorite part, besides going on the road like this, is the first draft, that blank page. I don't have set number of pages that I have to write, or a set number of hours I have to work. I work while it's giving me something. And while I can give something to the page, if it starts to be like what somebody described as shoving mashed potatoes through a keyhole, when I get to that point, I stop, because it's not doing any good at all. Every day I try to start with something that I've already written, a chapter. Sometimes I go all the way back to page 1 and read it, and that reminds me of the voice, and it reminds me of what's happening and where she's feeling, and it helps me ease into the next day's writing.
So it seems like the writing world is divided into outliners and pantsers, or people who write by the seat of their pants. Do you fall anywhere in that spectrum?
I fall right in between them. I always, when I have want to start a book, I always start with the first line and the last line.
Really?
So then I have an idea where it's going. That really helps me. I mean, I could change anything I wanted, but somehow one leads to the other, and I know what they are. Sometimes I will just open a bunch of chapters on the screen in the word processor and say chapter 1, chapter 2, and then go back and add things for when I start writing. I want to accomplish or to refer to. But most of the time, I will just start to write, and what I finish in one chapter will lead me, of course, to the next chapter. Where I am now in my new book is there isn't any of that richness, those details, those turns of phrase, or her voice coming through. It's more my voice. The first draft is more me, and that's what I like to go back and change it. And her name is Sally. Make it more Sally and less me.
So this book that you're talking about, that you're working on now, where and when is that set?
It's set in 1894 in Oregon. It's interesting that Milly is all about the water and the beach. And for some reason, I wanted to set a book somewhere on the Oregon coast, which is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And so I thought about Sally and she gets this obsession that she wants to see the sea. And she's an orphan, and she's been fired from her job at a hotel, and she's on the road, and she decides that she's going to go to the sea. So things happen, people help her. She's on a paddle wheel steamer from Portland to Astoria, which is almost on the coast, and then that's where she is now. I've gotten her that far, so now I have to figure out how to get her down the coast in 1894. There was no Pacific Coast Highway at that point. So I want to go and see what's there and talk to the historical societies, and they can help me imagine what it would be like for her.
So what was the spark for this particular character you're talking about now?
Was a first line. Yeah.
Can you tell us?
Sure. Let's see. Something like, what's her name? Ms. Broom. Ms. Broom just chucked me out like it was a chewed up chicken bone.
Okay.
I got to come up with a character who would say that line. Yeah.
Well, I really like that. I think that's a very intriguing first line. That immediately makes me want to know what's happening next. What's happening next? Let me see. What's the first line of the War and Millie McGonigle here? Just one sec.
Have to do with it.
Oh, this is good. George lifted the slimy creature to his mouth and bit it right between the eyes. Okay, that makes you want to read on, right? And the next line is, I had seen him and the other Portuguese octopus fishermen do that 100 times, but it still made me shudder. I love that. Those first two lines are very intriguing, and those are lines that I think would pull a young reader of any age into wanting to hear more about this. So we do have some.
I'm sorry. Phil was actually the octopus fishermen do that. They act.
Is that right?
There, yeah. So he really remembered it and told me in very vivid language about it. So I knew I had to start a book with that.
Yeah, that's something that you would remember, especially a child would remember that, because it's kind of awful. We have some time here. Can you give us a few minutes of a read, 4 or 5 minutes of a read from Milly?
I was going to start at the beginning, so they'll have to hear that first line again.
Well, that's good. I should have let you read those.
September 20, 1941, Saturday. George lifted the slimy creature to his mouth and bit it right between the eyes. I had seen them and the other Portuguese octopus fishermen do that 100 times, but it still made me shudder. Doesn't that taste muddy and disgusting? Nah, he said, wiping his mouth on his sleeve. Only salty. I told you this way he don't die, but only sleeps. Stays fresh till he's cooked. George threw the octopus into a bucket and slid over to another hole in the mud. He filled a turkey baster from a grimy Clorox bottle and squirted the bleach into the hole. In a minute, another octopus slithered to the surface to avoid the bleach. George grabbed it, pulled it out, and bit it. You want? Makes good stew. Another shudder ran up my back, and I shook my head. I'd as soon eat sand flea soup or mud snail chowder. I'll take my fish from a can, thank you, mixed with mayo and chopped onions. Anyway, the McGonigal's money troubles, bad as they were, did not require us to eat octopus stew. Not yet, anyway. I pulled my book of dead things from the waistband of my shorts. The octopuses in the bucket weren't exactly dead, but close enough, I decided, to add to the book. Squatting down, I examined them closely. Squishy and grayish with yellow splotches, many legs, bright blue eyes. Hey, George, octopuses have blue eyes. He wiped his face with his wet and muddy hands, leaving his face wet and muddy. Now, those fake eyes. He pulled another from its hole. They're real eyes up here. See? I looked. Indeed, the octopus's real eyes were higher on its head, dark and kind of sad, and George bit it right between them. I sketched an octopus as best I could, not being any kind of an artist. My drawing looked like a blob of nothing, which is pretty much what the octopuses looked like, but with bright blue eyes. Tucking my book away, I walked on. Above me, the September sun was bright and warm. In San Diego, it was almost always bright and warm. People called it paradise, but often I've longed for a dreary day. Heavy dark clouds, wind whistling over the water, rain tapping on the roof and falling plop, 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 leaving little pockmarks on the sand. Mama snorts when I say this and calls me a romantic. I don't think it's meant as a I don't think it's meant as a compliment. Except for the fishermen, I was alone on the beach. Summer visitors were mostly gone. Mission Beach is a spit of land 2 blocks wide and 2 miles long, with the ocean on one side and the bay on the other. Likely there were sunbathers and sandcastle builders over on the ocean side. But here on the bay it was quiet, with a scattering of cottages, some new, some shabby, all small, and few people to bother me. That was the way I liked it. I had tides to watch and dead things to find. Shall I go on, or do we have questions, or shall I read more?
No, I think you can read a little bit longer.
Okay, I sat myself on the end of the Lemke's dock, one of several wooden docks that reached out as if trying to touch the tiny island in the middle of the bay. The tide was out, and the mud flats, speckled with eelgrass, were alive with fiddler crabs, flies, and sand fleas. Here and there a boat was marooned in the mud, squeaked and scraped, awaiting the high tide that would float it once again. Twice a day, every day, the tide came in and went out. Pop said the changing tides were caused by gravitational forces related to the sun and the moon. I didn't understand how it worked, but each day I saw the waters of the bay recede and leave behind an expanse of mud and sand, and then return blue and deep. I could count on it, every day the same. I lay back on the warm boards of the dock, scratched the flea bites on my leg, and sniffed deeply of the rich, salty, fishy smell of the mud. Gulls screeched like rusty hinges as they soared above me, and flocks of curlews and sandpipers pecked for bugs for breakfast. There was plenty of life on the bay, but of peaceful stillness too, that comforted me when I needed comforting. A brown pelican came to a clumsy landing on the mud and shook water from its feathers. "What are you doing here?" I asked. The bird studied me closely with its dark, beady eyes, but said nothing. "Have you come to try and cheer me up?" "Everyone wants me to cheer up, but I refuse." Know why? I sat up and glared at the bird. "The world's full of war and death. That's why. Hitler's gobbling up one country after another, and I'm afraid he'll come here. My pop can't find a job. Mama's crabby, and Lily is sick all the time. What's there to be cheery about?" I took a deep breath and let it out with a woof. Want to hear more? The bird made, I'm sorry, I have a hard time reading with my glasses on. The bird made loud clucking sounds with its enormous beak, but still said nothing. Just yawned a huge yawn and ruffled its feathers. Then it hopped awkwardly down the beach, flapping its mighty wings before soaring into the air, growing smaller and smaller until it disappeared. That's what I get for trying to have a serious discussion with a pelican. Stupid bird. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Here we are showing you again War and Millie McGonigle. We've just been hearing author Karen Cushman do a reading for us. So, knowing how everybody's lives have changed to some degree over the last year, how or has the pandemic made a difference in either your writing? I'm sure it's made a difference in your publicizing of your book. What about your writing too? Has that affected that, do you think?
You know, I'm a moody romantic artist. So I love being alone in my room, making up things. And it's like the lockdown, the coronavirus lockdown, was a gift to me. I didn't have to go anywhere or do anything. I could spend more time just sitting and making things up and dreaming up what's going to happen in the next chapter. And so that it didn't make a big difference in my life. I got lonely sometimes. Well, not lonely, because I had my husband all the time, but once in a while I'd say, oh gee, I wish I could see X, or go somewhere with Y, or go to a real restaurant and not just eat takeout food in the living room. But it didn't affect me nearly as much as it did other people. And I'm not sure that it had much to do with my writing. When I started the book, there was no pandemic, there was no COVID, and so I just wrote. And as I got, it was already published when, or taken, and was in the process of being published when the lockdown and the really happened. And I thought about my readers. You know, we talked already about what I hoped that they would get from the book, and that has to do with what the virus and the lockdown has done to them. And I thought about it in terms of how the struggles that Milly faced and the fears that she had and the problems, and how they compared with what young people today have. And I realized that the big difference was that Milly could help finally do something about it. Young people collected cans and other metals to send to the government and to make airplanes. They thought they were making airplanes. And newspapers and grease. They collected bacon grease. Milly became a plane spotter. The kids would look at the sky and try and identify what planes went overhead to see if there were any Japanese or German planes coming. They saved their money to buy war bonds. So they all felt like they were pulling together and helping. But kids with the pandemic don't have that. I mean, they can't go out, and they can't go out often, but there's no way for them to substantially contribute to the fight against the pandemic the way kids, everybody in the 40s pulled together to fight and help America win the war. So the pandemic didn't affect me nearly as much as it does my young readers.
Right. Well, just the things that you've been talking about. I mean, the history, the period, everything about that period really comes alive in this book. And for young readers who have no experience of what life was like then, I think this is a great way to bring it to life for them. You know, I'm sure that people listening to this cannot imagine going door to door collecting bacon grease to help support the government, for example. That's an interesting thing. These details really do come alive in the book,
Good.
Which I think is wonderful. Yeah.
Good. It
Okay.
was a lot of fun to do that research to find out about rationing. And I was able to find out, for example, that Cheerios existed, but they were called Cheeriots. That Chef Boyardee spaghetti in a can existed at that time. So I had to check everything I thought of, and was it there then? And Wikipedia, of all strange places, helped a lot with that. But it was all of those details. I think that helped to make the time come alive. That everything that I've read about the war is often set in Japan or in Europe. There are a lot of books about World War II in Europe, and there's not much about young people on the home front, especially on the West Coast, that would say, hey, look, the war was here too, and this is how we fought it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what else besides the writing? Well, no, I have a question. It comes from me, not from the audience. We both started writing somewhat later in life. I finished my first novel 2 weeks for my 50th birthday. And I know that you started fairly late. Your first novel was published when you were, what, in your late 30s? Is that right?
Oh, yeah, right. And I'm only 40 now. So, no,
Yeah.
my first book was published when I was 52. Catherine Calpurnia started it when I was 50. And
okay, so we're very close on that. My first one was published when I think I was 54. So I'm sure there are people out there who would like to write. And there's something about taking that real first step that just feels very, very scary. Do you have any advice for those people?
Well, I would give them the same advice that I give to young kids who write and say, I'm 11 years old and I want to write a novel. To say, don't start there. That basketball players, if you want to play basketball, you don't start by challenging the Lakers to a game. You know, you go out in the driveway and you throw the ball at the hoop 6 million times for years. That's how you do it. So if you want to start writing, start with something small, and loosen up those muscles. Read a lot, write a lot, pay attention, look around you, because it's all going to be your material. And then sit down and do it in small steps. I mean, I did my first book in such small steps that they're only diary entries for one day. I could handle that. I could look at a blank page and say, all I have to do is say what happened on this particular day. I don't have to do the whole thing. And so it was much less intimidating to me. And interestingly enough, teachers have said that it's less intimidating for their reluctant readers, or for those who have a hard time reading, that they only have to read in small. But I would suggest that they take a look at the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, which is a worldwide organization, but it has a lot of local chapters. And they have workshops, they have meetings, they have discussion groups that can put you in with a writing group of some sort. And they have what's called the Philip and Karen, or Karen and Philip Cushman Late Bloomer Award, that I wanted to give back to SCBWI somewhat. And so what we've done is made a small award. People can apply as they apply for the work in progress grant. Those over 50 who have not been published are pulled out and are eligible for this Cushman Late Bloomer Award.
That's interesting. Yeah. So I mean, there are a lot of us late bloomers out there. Yay for us. We did it. Right. we crossed that threshold, which seems so high when you're first starting out and you're staring up at the thought of a book on a shelf, and how magic that would feel if you had one out there with your name on it. So it's I don't know about you. When you started out, I had a lot of fear. I had a lot of fear that this thing which is so important to me, I might not be able to do it.
It took me till 52 or whatever I was. 50, yeah, absolutely. I heard Anne Lamott say something. There's now a documentary about the writer Anne Lamott, which was charming and helpful to look at. And I don't know what she was talking about, but I remember that she said that she once saw a sign posted over the cage of Coco the gorilla at the San Diego Zoo. And Coco was the gorilla they were teaching sign language to. And the sign said, "Remain calm and share your bananas." And that's a perfect metaphor for writing, especially for a new, fearful writer. Remain calm, and your bananas are your ideas, your stories, this great sentence that you made, these values that you want to share. That take it easy, remain calm, and share your bananas.
I love that.
Yeah.
Right. I love that. I want that. I want that above my computer. So here. Yeah. So we just have a minute left. We've been talking about War and Millie McGonigle with Karen Cushman. So I have just one last question for you, which I think is a really interesting question. What else are you good at besides writing?
Oh, well, I'm good at puttering in the garden. I'm a good cook. I'm a really good cook, but at this age, I'm really sick of it. So, but I'm good at it. I'm surprisingly good at math and being organized, though you would never believe so listening to my talk about my process. Yeah, but math surprised me. When I was in high school, I used to go home and work on algebra for fun, do algebra problems, balance equations. And, so what else am I good at? I'm mostly good at writing. I'm good at relating to people.
Okay. Which I think probably is so important in a writer. So what are you bad at? What do you wish you were better at?
Oh, what do I wish? I wish I were more physical. I wish I liked exercise and hiking and things. I think that would be really good for me. I am bad at small talk in groups of people that I don't know. It just really bothers me. I am opinionated at times, and I should be more open politically, for example. And I am bad at flying. I hate to fly. I really, really hate to fly. So I'm not very good at that. And it would help if I were better at that.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So I think we're coming to the end of our time, unless you have something else you would like to throw out there.
One thing that I would like to say, yesterday I got it in the email, pictures from where Lena Dunham is filming a movie of Catherine Cushman in England. And she sent me some of the pictures from the set. Since we can't go, we were going to go, but we can't because of the pandemic. So she sent me photographs and people in costumes, and the sets are so beautiful. It's like I could actually be there. Like there was a real birdie and she was there. It's so wonderful. So everybody should watch for Catherine Cushman, the movie done by Lena Dunham, and it's going to be, when it's finished, on Amazon.
That is so exciting. I wish we could see them. There's no way you can show any of those to us at this moment, is there?
Not for published consumption yet.
Yeah.
But
okay.
I will ask and find out. And
that is terribly exciting.
It is exciting, yeah.
Yeah. Now, this is your first book that's being turned into a movie.
The Ballad of Lucy Whipple was made into a CBS movie of the week, starring Glenn Close and Jenna Malone, and that was
I see.
Like in 1999, I think that was, and it was on TV. I had a lot of issues with that, with what they did with the movie, but I read a quote from Ann Tyler once, who said, "This is my book. This is their movie." You know, and she, you have to say. You can't say, "Oh, I didn't say that," or "I didn't write that," or "Why did you put that character in?" You know, that's their movie. Yes.
Right. Yes, that's right. It's not your movie anymore. It's someone else's movie. They can't take your book from you. They can't change a word in your book. But once they buy the movie, they kind of run and do whatever they feel like it. Yeah. It can be a problem.
Yeah. Well, so I'm trusting her. with Birdie, that she'll be nice to her.
That's very exciting, and we will look for that. And in the meantime, War and Millie McGonigle, available through the Nowhere bookstore, which is available through the Book Festival website. Thank you, Karen Cushman, so much. We've enjoyed talking to you today. And I am going to be signing off here.
All right.
All right. Bye.